Hello class. So today we're going to do a web quest. We're going to begin it today. It's called Life in a Tide Pool, and you can probably guess it's going to be studying tide pools and the life that is in them, the different organisms that you find there. And so a web quest is a project-based lesson. So we're going to come out with a project, which in this case is going to be a presentation. But our goals for this web quest are to integrate information from more than one text on a topic in order to write and speak about the subject knowledgeably. So we're going to take information from several sources and put it together to learn something and share about it. So our second goal is discovering and analyzing structures that support survival and behavior of organisms that we find in tide pools. And we're going to write informative texts to share our ideas and the information clearly. So for introduction, tide pools are special environments with special organisms. They have their own weather conditions, meaning it's unlike an ocean environment, which is underwater all the time, and it's unlike a land environment, which is essentially dry all the time. Tide pools are kind of half in and half out of the water, because when the tide comes in, they're underwater, and when the tide goes out, they are exposed. And so there are special kinds of organisms that live there that have special adaptations to be able to survive in that kind of environment. And so because the tide comes in and goes out, they are vulnerable to predators both in the ocean and in the air and on the land outside of the water. When they're exposed, this is a good thing for us because human beings can easily then see them when the water is shallow or the water is gone completely and those creatures are just sitting there and we can see them. We can see what they do, like these starfish here and lots of other organisms. They're just open for us to look at and examine, and that's pretty neat. So here, as a way to kind of pique your interest, I've included 3 pictures of organisms that you would typically find in tide pools. And before you're done with your web quest, you will most likely know what each of these are. You probably already know what this is, but these are a little more tricky if you aren't familiar, and so that will be interesting. I think they're especially beautiful, these 3. And so your mission, you are a marine biologist and you work at the Monterey Bay Aquarium, and your mission is to go to a nearby elementary school and teach 2nd graders about tide pools, because they're going to be going on a field trip to the tide pools. And so this presentation that you're going to give them will make it interesting to them. It will help them understand what they will see when they get there, and it will teach them how they should behave when they are there at the tide pools. So our task is going to be developing a presentation that you're going to give to the 2nd graders. That's your project. And you're going to, for the first part, explain how tide pools are formed. And you're going to talk about how the moon is involved and what happens at high and low tide, how often they occur, and the best time to explore tide pools and why that is. You're going to present this by acting it out with your group in a role play or illustrating or drawing a diagram. And if you have different ideas, that's okay too. You'll just need to clear it with me beforehand so we make sure they're okay. And so for the second part of your task, you will be constructing and presenting a food chain. You are going to include 3 tide pool organisms. You're going to include their name and physical description. You're going to say how they are adapted for life in tide pools. You're going to say at least one interesting fact about it. And you're going to describe the predator-prey relationships between them. And the third part of your task will be to write a summary of your favorite tide pool creatures and or plants. Then you're going to present this by reading it out loud or telling the highlights of it. And then the very last part is going to be concluding by giving tips about how to behave while they are at the tide pool, and what they should do, what they shouldn't do, and why. And so here is step 1 of your procedure of how you're going to do this. So with your group, you're going to learn how the tide pool is formed by searching these sources here. One is a video, one is not. And then from that information, you're going to, you can take notes if you need to, draw a labeled diagram or picture. You can use the whiteboard or a poster. And then from this, you would explain to show the process of how tide pools are formed. So it should have labels on it and arrows and whatever you need to explain that. Or you can plan out a role play with narration, and if you do the role play option, each member of the group needs to have a part in acting out. And one could be the narrator and the others could act it out, or however you choose. So each group member must have a part in either way that you choose to present this. The next step of your task, the procedure, is working with your group again, searching these sources here for different tide pool organisms, and you're going to take notes, most likely on the predator-prey table. And after you put that information in, you'll be ready to do your food chain. So make sure on this source right here to explore the links. All of these are separate links. You'll see it when you get in there, because there's lots of different creatures that will appeal to different ones of you. And so if you look at them all, then you'll know which ones you want to learn more about, because you won't be able to fit them all in your predator and prey table. And so here is the example of the predator and prey table. So you've got 3 columns: prey, organism, and predator. So essentially what you're going to do is you're going to be looking at one organism. Say you looked at a sea star. You would put it here, ochre sea star. And then you're going to say, what eats it? A predator to this animal. And you would write it there. And then you would say what this eats right here, the prey of this organism right here. And then down here you would just pick another random tide pool animal, and you would put that in here, and you could say what eats it over here and what it eats over here. And eventually you'll start to see some patterns. If you want to get the pattern going earlier than later, you can put this guy, this predator, right here, and then put something that eats it here and something it eats here, and you'll already have 2 pieces of your food chain. So you can play around with that, but I'm sure you'll figure it out and have fun learning about different organisms in the meantime. So step 3 is going to be using the information from that chart that you filled in, that table, and you're going to create your own food chain. These here are just examples of food chains, and so just to refresh your memory of what those can look like. And so, but this is what yours are going to look like. You can either do this, or you can do one of these. These are more cut and paste in color types and more crafty than this one. This is, pretty simple, but you're gonna on either option, you're going to have the organism with the name and the description, an interesting fact about them, and an adaptation for living in tide pools. And then you're going to have what it eats under here, name, description, interesting fact, adaptation, what it eats down here. So then you'll end up with your food chain. So this same information you're going to incorporate into one of these or another idea. The information will be the same, just how you display it will be different. And this is also working as a group also. All together, one food chain. Now, using your notes from before or researching these links right here, you're going to write a mini report. And it's going to be about your favorite tide pool creature, and you're going to talk about what it looks like, what kind of organism it is, details that are interesting to you, adaptations for tide pool life, and each one of you in the group is going to have your own mini report because all of you will have different favorites. And so step 5 is going to be to watch the video here and get information about your conduct at the tide pools. So this is what you're going to see to find out what to do, what not to do at tide pools. And plan a short concluding speech to the second graders so that they know how they should behave while they're there on their field trip. And so each of you should have a note card to remind yourself of what you're going to say. And so this is all together as a group, so you're each going to say something different. And so here's the rubric of what is going to be graded for this presentation. So the first 6 points you get, you'll have if you have a clear and complete explanation of the tide pool formation, including the moon's role, high and low tides and frequency, best time for tide pool exploring, and why. The second 6 points are going to be based on your food chain that has 3 organisms and all the parts we talked about before. And the next 6 points will be for your mini report about your favorite tide pool creature, and you'll have to include all the information that it says to, and have 4 or fewer spelling and punctuation errors. And then your last 6 points are going to be based on your conclusion that you give them about their behavior at the tide pool and how they should conduct themselves there. And also very important, you only get all points if on the group parts you are all participating in presenting that and in the research. So, in conclusion, when you have finished this web quest, you should have a better understanding of tide pool formation and of life that exists in tide pools. You should have discovered how different organisms depend on each other for survival and what kinds of adaptations help them survive in their ever-changing tide pool habitat. You will also have a sense of the appropriate way to experience tide pools and observe the wildlife in them. And so one probing question extending your thinking could be, what might be a long-term result if one type of organism from your food chain started being hunted by another predator or collected by humans? What could happen? And some extensions of this web quest might be to construct a food web of tide pool organisms, since you made a food chain. So here would be an extension by including more organisms in a food web. Or you could create your own fictitious tide pool creature or plant, and you would include a physical description, and you could write about it, you could draw it, you could build a model of it, you could talk about its adaptations and predator and prey information. Since you learned a lot about those kinds of things, you could make your own imaginary tide pool creature. And that is that.